Skill of the day. Today's skill of the day is going to be the dumbbell snatch. So dumbbell snatch is one of those things where we can do quite a lot of reps at some time, and most of the time it isn't a massive amount of weight. So lots of reps coupled with not too much weight tends to lead to allowing ourselves to be put into really poor positions. This needs to be treated exactly the same way as you would if you were doing a heavy deadlift or a heavy barbell snatch. There's no different. All right, so what is the position that we're looking for in the dumbbell snatch? So we straddle over the top of the dumbbell, and when we are over the top of it, we have our feet at around about shoulder width apart. From there, we hinge over at our hips, and when we come down, we want our shoulder over the top of the dumbbell handle. And also, let's have a look at this way. I want my shoulders square with the floor. A good way to have a look at where we want our shoulders, if you place the fingertips down of your opposite hand that's not doing the work yet, then that will ensure that your shoulders are square with the ground. Because what tends to happen as we get tired or when we get a little bit lazy, we reach down and we grab a hold of it like that. So we're causing twisting through the spine. And then we're lifting a relatively heavy load, but also really dynamically lifting that weight. And it puts a lot of pressure and stress through that lower back. And then you wind up one side of the lower back really a lot when you're doing it for a massive amount of reps and you're doing that every single time. The other common fault that we see is being lazy with the legs and just hinging over like this. All right, so again, that's going to put our lower back into a really poor position. So if you know you're someone that puts up with a really sore lower back after dumbbell snatches, then you need to listen into this. And if you're not, listen in anyway, because it's going to make you more efficient at the movement. All right, so what we need to focus on when we're coming down to the dumbbell is we hinge over at our hips. We then bend through the knees to grab a hold of it. So if you look at my hip position is just above my knees. So I'm not in a squatting position, but I'm not in a deadlift position. It's more your clean or your snatch position. All right, from here, the first part of the movement is I'm going to drive through my heels. So I get that full extension through my knees and my hips. Notice my arm is still straight at this stage. Once I've reached that full extension, I then get my elbow high and then drop underneath. Stand it up tall, and that is where the rep finishes. Let's have a look at a couple of reps, alternating arms of the dumbbell snatch in a row. And from this direction. All right, so you'll notice a couple of things. I keep the dumbbell in really close to my body at all times. We don't want the dumbbell to travel away from our body. We need to keep it in really close to keep that movement efficient and keep the stress off our lower back. Number two is I really try and delay my arm bend. Now it's a lot more difficult in a dumbbell snatch, but we still need to keep that arm as straight as we can for as long as we can before we pull the elbow up. So the first movement we're going to go through today, we're going to go through a dumbbell deadlift. All right, so for a dumbbell deadlift, we're going to come down into our dumbbell snatch position, not a deadlift position. From there, we're going to stand up, extend through the hips and knees. Notice how I get that really fast and vigorous hip extension at the top. I'm then going to place it down, and I'm going to swap arms each time. All right, notice what happens when I place it down and swap arms. My shoulders, see how they stay in that same position? I do not reach and lift the opposite shoulder. Really important to keep those shoulders square with the floor. Let's do 10 dumbbell deadlifts, alternating sides each time. That's 1, 2, keep going. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, good. So that is the first action to our dumbbell snatch. It is that dumbbell deadlift with a straight arm and getting good extension through the hips and the knees. The next part is the high elbow piece. All right, so again, this helps keep the dumbbell in really close to the body, and it makes sure that we get that core to extremity. So we use the core muscles, hips, to get that good explosive extension before we use the extremities and pull up with the arm. So let's have a look at that one. All right, so again, I'm controlling from the floor to keep good position. I then drive and then pull up with my elbow. Notice how I almost finish up on my toes a little bit, but I still am driving through my heels, staying back on those heels. Let's do 6 dumbbell high pulls. Ready? Go. 1. Swap arms. 2. Keep going. 3. 4. 5. And 6. All right, so that's our dumbbell high pull. So that's the second piece to our dumbbell snatch. The third piece is the receive. Now, if the weight is relatively light for you, we may opt for a muscle snatch. That's where we don't need to move the feet or rebend through the knees. I'll show you what that looks like. And for most of us, if the weight is relatively heavy, we'll need to drop back under it and land back in our squat position. Let's have a look first of all at the muscle snatch. I'll just go from the side. So exactly what we just went through, the deadlift to the high pull. Then from there, we're simply going to turn and punch and finish underneath that dumbbell. So from here, right, swapping arms. One more time. Notice how I remain extended through the knees and the hips. I don't dip back under the dumbbell. Now let's have a look at it from a power point of view, or a dumbbell snatch. From here, opposite side, and again. All right, so notice on that one, I've got my high elbow. Then from there, I drop underneath, receive in that squatting stance and punch the elbow out. Then I stand it up, and that's where the rep is finished. All right, so depending on what the weight is relative to you, if it's really light, then you might opt for the muscle snatch. Obviously, you can move a little bit faster. If it's a little bit heavier, then we'll probably go to the power snatch and drop down underneath that dumbbell. All right, the next thing you need to decide is how are you going to swap that dumbbell over? Now, it's in the past, CrossFit has brought out the standard where it must be below the level of the eyes in order for you to touch it with the opposite hand. However, in recent times in the Masters Online Qualifier, that standard was taken away. Are they going to follow through with that? We're not quite sure. So let's have a look at the 3 different options. Option number 1 is simply placing it down before you swap hands. This is one that I would suggest if you are really having to focus on the movement, or if it is a really heavy movement for you, then I'd place it down, set your position before you go into each rep. Then the next option, I'm going to swap it below the height of my eyes. And the next option, overhead. Notice how when I swap hands, I either meet with this hand, keeping it below my eyes, and then I bring it down to touch both heads to the floor before driving back up. Efficiency is key, and I literally touch both hands into the dumbbell, not try and throw it in the air or be too fast, because there is a real risk of dropping the dumbbell. So as I swap over, I touch my other hand to it, wait till it's definitely in the other hand before I take my original hand away. Go get it, that is the dumbbell snatch.